we have the Mason County Sheriff's Office, Casey Salisbury, and assorted people. And I would like, I'm sorry if you could maybe introduce yourselves again, as I can't really remember everyone's name. Take it away, Sheriff Salisbury.
Okay. We've got a slide that you have to be written on it. Well, thank you. It was a little challenging for us. We got one set of questions, and a couple days later we got another set of questions, and then we got another set of questions, and so we went with the shorter list. It was the most updated to start off with to answer questions for you. So the one thing that you'll refer to, each one of the staff has been assigned one of those questions for their area to answer. One of the challenges for us is that oftentimes we are asked a yes or no question or amount this compared to an amount that from another agency. And the fact of the matter is that you can't compare those sometimes. And so to give you one number and another without an explanation, it's not a justifiable or honest answer. So you'll hear us a number of times in some of the questions that you ask, how do you look compared to this agency? Well, we may not have anybody of that rank or anybody doing that agency has. So it looks a little different for us. Second piece is the chief was going to put up there. We have a mission statement, our motto, leading excellence, service, and safety, and the core values of professionalism, integrity, accountability, respect, and partnership. And everybody in our office, when they're hired, signs for those. And if there's violations of those, persons can be disciplined or removed in our office because of that. We're one of the first agencies in the state to start doing that. Now everybody else is. The next thing I'll cover real quickly as we go into this, aside from the things that you see up here, it's my belief, and I would tell you along with the other 38 sheriffs of the state of Washington, I spent 6 years with the State Sheriff's Association, president of that for 2. We believe, all the sheriffs, all 39 of us, believe that it isn't just the badge, it's what goes on behind the badge and outside of the badge. It's not just arresting people and taking people to jail is what makes a sheriff's office. So our interest that we have in our community, we work very, very closely with. We have a very strong relationship and support of our veterans. We are very involved with our Special Olympics and persons with special needs. We have been doing a lot of training. You'll hear about the question that she had later about mental health issues and dealing with people with mental health and being involved in that and training people in the areas of mental health. And we also are very involved in a program with every sheriff in the state and every prosecutor in the state known as Fight Crime Invest in Kids Washington. And that's just supporting our young people to prevent them from becoming involved in crime. The next, I just got it up there already, the photo you're seeing now is a law enforcement agency accreditation award. We were one of the first sheriff's offices in the state of Washington to actually achieve this. And we're already now coming up and having a review on that from 2015 to now. It's a long process. We were one of the first sheriff's offices in the state. In 1989 or 90, a little while after I was here, the sheriff's office under Bob Holter was one of the first, and then they had never updated it since then. So we went through and we meet all the state accreditation standards, of which there was only, at the time, 3 county sheriff's offices in the state. Many chiefs had met it. The 3 county sheriff's offices in the state at that time had met accreditation standards, and we will be soon going through that for our jail. Introducing you today, I can stand to this side of Travis. Under Sheriff Jim Barrett has been appointed as my under sheriff when I first came here in 2007. Jim has been with me all that time. We actually went to college together over Central. Chief Russ Osterhout, Chief Osterhout, retired Sergeant Major from the United States Army, and Russ came to work on my shift over at Thurston County, and we met over there, and Russ followed me from Thurston County over here to become my chief deputy. Chief Ryan Sperling. Chief Sperling is a retired member of the Washington State Patrol. When Chief Sperling retired, I appointed him to our chief's position. Chief Kevin Hansen, I was able to say a little bit on this, to steal Chief Hansen from the Lewis County Sheriff's Office, one of the most highly recognized and regarded jail chiefs in the state of Washington, and Kevin came up to us fairly recently as the chief of our jail. Chief Tammy Byer. Chief Byer is the chief of civil division for all the legal paperwork in those areas. Chief Teresa Eric is in our finance and administration, part handling all of our finance issues. I didn't see Lieutenant Caston. She run the jail for you today. Lieutenant Caston is not here today. Lieutenant Travis Adams is with us today. and Lieutenant Jason Dracovy, and Deputy Heather Prigger. Stand up, Heather, because Heather's sitting so quietly back there with her partner. I'm just going to introduce Heather real quick and let her talk for a couple minutes about her partner and what they do, so that he doesn't, and they don't have to remain in the back trying to sit so quietly. So go ahead, Heather, and tell us about your dog, how long you've been with us, and kind of what your responsibilities are.
Yeah, my name is Heather Prigger. I've been a deputy with Mason County since 2014. This is Canine Ryder. He's my partner. He's a patrol tracking canine. We certified December of last year. So we've been working on the road for a little bit less than 3 weeks. And I've really enjoyed every minute I've had with him. It's been a really long process. We went through over 400 hours to train him and certify. He came to us from a breeder here in Mason County with some basic obedience and basic training. So some of my duties out here is to respond to all types of calls. I'm a deputy first, so I respond to any types of disturbances. I handle traffic control. I run traffic. So, and then when I'm not doing traffic control, I am working with him. I train him all throughout my work day when I'm not handling calls or working traffic, and we respond to canine type calls. So any calls for a subject that might have run from a vehicle in the woods or done committed some crime and then ran on foot, he is used as a locating tool. He can also check buildings and tell me if there's a person in there that potentially is hiding in a closet, hiding in a bedroom, anything like that. So he is used for locating and apprehension, and he does a very good job at it and really seems to enjoy it because it is just a game for him. So he just has fun with it.
So he locates and tracks, those are his duties?
He does. So he tracks and he apprehends. So
how does he do that?
he'll use his mouth. And he'll actually take a hold of the subject if he needs to. If the subject is restraining or fighting him, then that's what he is used for. So, Go ahead.
Does he get time off?
He does. He actually lives with me full time. So when I'm off, he's off. And we spend basically all of our time together. So he's with me pretty much 24/7. So he sleeps in the house with me and hangs out at home on the weekends.
Heather, thanks for coming up today. Yeah. As far as I know, going back actually, at one time we had one lady that started to train. Heather's our first female canine officer, deputy for our office, and so we're real proud of that, and real proud of what our dogs have accomplished, our canine units have accomplished since we've got them here. And I appreciate you coming in. You can sit patiently if you want to. I used to teach elementary school, and I always find it interesting that they could sit those dogs down and get their attention span longer than a lot of the kids that I had when I was teaching school. So, what a great job at that. We had that list, like I said, a list of questions, and we went through that. And so, what we did is to try to cover all of them for you. And then at the end, we'll have questions if we miss something or something else. Each question was assigned to each one of the division chiefs or lieutenants, and they're going to go down through and give their explanation. It's just not a one-piece answer. So with that, I'd like to welcome Chief Criminal Deputy Russ Osterhout, and he'll answer the first question.
Again, I'm the Chief Deputy of Patrol. I'm in charge of patrol right now. I used to be in charge of patrol and detectives, and I went back to patrol. So at the end, at this point in time, I'm in charge I'm the Chief Deputy of Patrol. And so we had the one question, how many full-time employees, or FTEs, work in the Mason County Sheriff's Office? So, at the beginning of 2017, we had 109 FTEs, full-time employees. We lost some positions because of our budget cuts. We had to go ahead and lose. We cut back on the positions that we had, and we lost 4 deputy positions. We lost 4 corrections deputy positions, 1 record position, 1 finance position, and 1 animal control, and 2 cooks. So we lost 13 positions, and we are now at 96 FTE, full-time employees. And I can break those down further in my notes, I don't have it up here on the slide, but in patrol, we have 1 chief, 2 lieutenants, 4 sergeants, 4 corporals, 27 deputies. In detectives, we have 1 chief, 1 sergeant, 1 corporal, 5 detectives, and 1 evidence technician. In records, we have 1 chief, 1 clerk, 1 community service officer, 2 record specialists, and 2 clerks. In the finance section, we have 1 chief of finance and 2 assistants. And we have 1 IT deputy. We have 1 deputy assigned there as he does IT computer stuff. In corrections, we have 1 chief, 1 lieutenant, 4 sergeants, 3 corporals, 18 corrections deputies, and 2 records clerks. In the executive area, I have the sheriff and undersheriff. Okay. Yes.
So is the 109 actually people who were on board, or was that what you were funded for?
That's what we were funded for, I believe. I know we didn't have everything full at the time. We did have, I can't remember exactly, yeah, but we did have everything filled. I think we had empty positions, I know, in the jail.
We have 4 vacant positions.
Right.
So that was funded, that was unfunded. So we didn't have to give big slips.
So just to keep it apples and apples.
Yes.
So the 2000, if you could go back to that chart, the 2017 was how many actual people who were on board? Or are both of those numbers FTEs?
Yeah, both those
9
numbers.
positions, and we cut down to the 90.
We had 2 people that retired in May, and we had 2 people that were offered jobs. We had 2 deputies that ended up going to other places to work. And we had probably, at the time, we had the budget reduction in July 7 we were still trying to fill, and others that we just gave conditional offers to that we ended up not hiring. Yeah,
As we go through,
we laid 2 off.
as we move through, I think some of those questions will be answered.
Any other?
Yes. How many people do you have that are actually like daily out on patrol and
We're going to cover that.
I was going to cover that next
Oh.
slide. Any other questions?
I kind of need the same comparison. How many of the 109 FTEs were vacant, and how many of the 96 FTEs are vacant?
You have that?
There was 7 at the first of the year vacant of the 109, no, 5. 7, and then there's 4 out right now. Our process that we utilize takes, in fact, I was trying to fill 1 position for financial assistant for 4 years. It took that long.
And I'm on the city civil service, so I know about
Yeah, okay.
the hiring
'Cause
process and all
I
that.
couldn't believe it, and then even when I worked there, it's even more unbelievable. Anyway, yeah.
I just
So-
needed some kind of comparison.
There's always vacant positions because of the retirements. We've had people, since the time that we had the attrition, we also have, people that end up leaving to go other places or retiring and do things. So
Very
we're
short
constantly
sometimes,
working.
or, yeah.
As we go through, I think most of these are going to be answered, because we went right off the questions you guys asked. So if there's at the end,
Could we just real quickly explain how the questions, there appears to have been some confusion on how the questions were. There were questions that were more detailed that came to you, I believe that Cheryl brought to you, that were for our budget study. So those, we did not expect you to come in here today and answer those detailed questions.
we're
The several
pretty much
years.
ready for that, because when we got the second set, we got the first set and went, this is going to take a while. Then we got a second set that were more general. We're going to cover those. But we do have answers for most of the other ones that you have. So as we go through, we'll probably answer those.
But some of them will get written responses to, those that are way more detailed, you'll provide responses to.
Well, if there's information to cover it, yes. I mean, we don't have a charter graph for every single question, but I think we have answers to
But
that.
we're not expecting it
We'll do that
today.
later as well.
But later that'll come.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, just wanted to clarify that.
And one more thing I wanted to cover, I forgot, there are going to be 2 more layoffs on April 15th. and the undersheriff's gonna be laid off, and I'll be laid off. And so, we do have some other budget cuts we have to do. And so instead of laying off some of the younger deputies here, which we don't want to do, we lay off some of the older guys here, and then we'll go ahead and find ourselves another job somewhere. Now, we'll retire. Just say Any other questions? Okay. Here's question number 2. How many deputies, detectives, and administration, and how many commissioned officers? Right now, we currently have 50 total fully commissioned law enforcement officers assigned to the sheriff's office. And these are people with arrest authority in the state of Washington. They're the ones out there doing traffic, working patrol. They're as assigned as detectives. And they are assigned to the following areas. We have 33 deputies, which includes sergeants and corporals, assigned to patrol duties in the patrol division. We have 2 deputies assigned to special assignments in the patrol division. That's the Lake Cushman housing area and the Timber Lakes housing area. And they work patrol duties in Lake Cushman and Timber Lakes, but they can also be moved from these areas depending upon staffing levels. And we have 1 deputy assigned as a school resource officer / deputy. That's a new thing. Deputy Goldenson. We have 5 deputies, 1 sergeant and 1 corporal assigned to the detectives. And we have 7 fully commissioned personnel assigned to the administration. The sheriff, the undersheriff, 2 chief deputies, 2 lieutenants, and 1 deputy. He's the IT deputy. And the reason we put him there, he has an unbelievable amount of knowledge how to work on computers, and everybody has a computer in the sheriff's office. And not only that, he knows all the cell phones, the radios, and he does work patrol duties as well. He has all kinds of stuff that he does, so.
Do you have
Any
computers in
questions?
your cars?
Excuse me?
Do you have computers in your patrol cars?
Yes. All patrol deputies have a computer.
The administration, we don't.
We have desk computers. Are there any questions?
Yeah, one more.
Yes.
It just occurred to me, I'm trying to visualize an area in Mason County. How many square miles?
I'll cover that. Got a slide for that.
Oh, you have a slide for that too?
Yes, ma'am.
Wonderful.
Are there any questions on this? Anything further? These are some of our volunteers here.
With our volunteers, I think an important thing to understand on this, we probably have, out of all the sheriffs in the state, the largest group of volunteers of any sheriff in the state of Washington. And I can tell you that our volunteer cadre keeps our North End office, the only reason that even stays open, we don't have the staff to run that. That's all run by volunteers 5 days a week, and they're open all day long up there. So when you're considering why we have North offices, and I keep hearing how many people we have, that's all run by volunteers. We have a number of volunteers that work in our South office that help us with a bunch of other things as well. So really like to credit him because we're in one of the only places in the state, and I'm almost sure that we have more volunteers than some counties have employees, and some county offices have employees. Go ahead.
How many do you have?
29.
Volunteers?
29.
29.
There's 15 in the picture.
Do you have the total hours, Chief Bear?
I do. For 2016, the volunteers worked a total of 4,504.5 hours. That's up from 2016, so.
This question here is, how do the numbers from question number 2 compare to comparable counties? These are our comparable counties. Skagit, Lewis, Cowlitz, Lallam, Grace Harbor, Island County, and Jefferson County. Well, I'm not sure if Island and Jefferson should be included, but sometimes they are, sometimes they're not, so we'll put them in there. Here we have the unincorporated populations of each county, the incorporated cities for each county. As you see, we only have 1 incorporated city, like something like Grace Harbor has 9. Lewis has 8. The commission, fully commissioned FTEs in the cities, and the square miles of the county. in the sheriff's office, fully commissioned personnel assigned. We could break, further down, I don't know where each individual deputies or fully commissioned personnel are assigned within each sheriff's office. I didn't really have time to break that down like I did with Mason County, but we could probably find that information now, just getting up a phone call. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
So what does that tell us? Does that tell us that we're doing well, that we're as good as other counties as far as how we're covered? Or that we're down low in the totem pole as far as deputies and staff?
The way I'm looking at you, we'd like to have one deputy or one fully commissioned personnel, a person assigned to every 1,000 people within the county. And so right here, we got a population of 52,000 within Mason County, unincorporated. We have 50 assigned fully commissioned personnel, so.
The FBI recommends 1.5 officers per 1,000.
The challenge for us is that we've got places like Belfair that any other county would be a city. And we have to cover that in addition to everything else in the north end. So in any of the other counties, or most of the other counties in the state that I work for, anything near that size would have their own police department. The challenge we have is we only have, if you look down the list, Skagit County, Mason County's got 20 commissioned people assisting us. Okay, you look down at Skagit County, they've got 106. Lewis County's got 57 additional commissioned people within the county because of the number of cities that they have. So we don't have that backup that the other counties have. So when our folks go out, we're on our own.
So that column is commissioned FTEs, for instance, with Moody.
Yes. Chief Moody.
Chief Moody here in town.
Yes.
Okay. It doesn't,
I think if you go on, there's going to be a slide later, page 23, to answer your question about does it show whether we're doing well or not, and that answer will show you exactly how many commissioned law enforcement are in each of those comparable counties. So when it comes to the issue of mutual aid, where we need backup as a county entity from a city office or a state patrol or tribal officers, you'll see that, and quickly, Mason County has right now 81 commissioned law enforcement officers in this county.
That's everybody.
From all agencies. Ability to conduct general law enforcement. Skagit County has 179. Lewis has 119. Cowlitz has 159. Clallam has 100. And Grace Harbor has 146. So when you talk about our relative ability to respond to calls in major incidences like we had in the North Mason School, etc., we have very little to bring to the table unless we rely on outside agencies. We run out of bodies very quickly. So that's one of the reasons when you look at our numbers, we have traditionally tried to keep our commissioned FTEs at a higher rate because we don't have those cities for mutual aid. So but we'll have a slide there that gives that broken down into much more detail.
A little thing just occurred to me, the state patrol is located in Mason County. Are they included in
Yes.
that 89 that you?
Only the detachment, the student officers that go to the academy do not count towards that, but the actual detachment in Shelton is
Anybody who's
included
commissioned, in
Yes.
other words?
in the detachment. So there's 6 Washington State troopers assigned to the detachment. They would be included in that number.
But they're not shown on this chart, nor is it tribal.
Well, when you go down later, you'll see it, yes, yes.
Does the square miles in each county, is that include federal land?
Yes.
And who patrols federal lands?
Well, you're supposed to have people that do that, but guess who gets called for that? When there's a missing person, when there's sometimes a state on an injury accident, depending on the roadway will go. But generally, that's our sheriff's office. It has to go to the criminal issues on the plan.
How many officers, how many law enforcement officers are with the Parks and the Forest Service?
Forest Service has one that covers the entire region that includes Clallam, Jefferson, and Mason County. So we have a mutual aid agreement and a cross-commissioning agreement in which we will handle calls on federal land. And then some of that investigations are reimbursable through Title III monies. So if we conduct criminal investigations on federal forest land or in the parks, and it falls under search and rescue, or if it falls under a criminal investigation, our time and effort in those investigations can be reimbursed under Title III. So there is some recuperation of those dollars, but they have one federal law enforcement officer to cover 3 counties.
For the parks and?
The state parks or the national park.
Well, I'm talking both.
The state parks, they traditionally, there's only a couple that will come off. I think we have 2 state park officers right now in our county to cover everything.
And DNR has 1 officer to cover like 4 or 5 counties, Department of Natural Resources land. So when something happens on those lands, we get called in.
Can you clarify the tribal thing?
The tribal thing is in,
So the tribal land is included here or not?
Tribal officers, if they have general commission and authority through the state, they are included in the count. For example, the Squaxin tribal officers, almost all of them have gone through the state academy and received their equivalency, which authorizes the sheriff, if he chooses, to cross-commission those tribal officers to commit general law enforcement outside of the reservation boundaries. Skokomish tribe, on the other hand, have not gone through those equivalency standards and don't have that authority to come off on tribal lands. Each one of those tribes, we police in a different method based on their agencies, certifications, commissioning statuses, and the public law of those tribes.
Have any of the Squaxin been cross-commissioned?
yes, they were not cross-commissioned until I came here in 2007. We started working that process when Mike Evans was chief, and we've carried that on. They're not commissioned until they've been to the academies. And now they meet, and the other thing that's important, there's a whole bunch of things involved in that, but the Squaxin Line tribe charges most of their offenses into Washington State Court. That's why we have that.
But yeah, so all but, I believe, 2 of the Squaxin officers have met the standards. None of these Skokomish officers have met the standards.
So on the Skokomish Reservation, it's the Mason County Sheriff's Office that has to go in if there is trouble of any kind?
Not of any kind. They
Well,
handle
right.
issues. They have a tribal police agency that handles mostly things that involve tribal law, but when it gets into felony crimes
Then-
or something that's more involved, we handle.
There's also the real basics that if it's a non-tribal member, the case is referred to us. If it's a tribal member, it's handled within the
Internally.
tribes. Yes.
Unless it's a felony.
Yeah.
And the Squaxin officers are not authorized to commit law enforcement off the reservation unless they receive supervisory approval. So if they notice a crime committing in their presence, or a crime has been reported and they're very close, they can request approval from our supervisor to invoke their commission to come off the reservation, which authorizes them to commit law enforcement outside of the reservation boundaries. That's kind of the cliff notes of how we handle things.
That's on a case-by-case basis?
Yes, yes.
Sorry to, like, this will be it, but, so much as when the federal, say, officer helps us, or if we commit to helping them, we get reimbursed from the federal government, some kind of Title III money. Is there anything similar, parallel from, like, Bureau of Indian Affairs, or any other way of getting remunerated?
You have the Squaxin has a tribal, there's a impact fund. I believe it's the 1% impact fund. I can't recall if it's the 1 or 2%. Forgive me that, but yes, there is an offset that the tribe recognizes that the burden that the casino and other gaming issues did have an effect on law enforcement. So they do provide, I believe, $100,000 per year to help offset those costs to the county. The Skokomish Reservation has not done that at that point, but there is a process to apply for what they call 1% funds, but they're very small amounts.
Go ahead, Chief.
Yeah, again, I didn't include all the tribal police in here, but I think every county up here has a tribe except Island County, and I don't know if they are cross commissioner or they have a special commissioner or not. I don't think we included that in any of the slides. We just didn't have time to get that information down, which we know here in Mason County, but I don't know like in Skagit County or the other counties.
Question.
Yes. Yeah, well, yeah.
I have a question about the payback from the tribes, the $100,000. Does that go directly to the sheriff's office budget, or does that go to the county and then get distributed to the sheriff?
The 95,000 goes into the general fund.
It goes into the general fund. And it's 95?
Lieutenant Adams, I think you're up next. So our Marine Patrol working with the Coast Guard on an issue. You may have heard because of the reductions this year, we're going to be very, very limited as when lakes call and just want patrols. We simply just don't have the staff or the funding allocated, so we'll be responding in emergent situations and possibly, depending on what we have money for, on a very large weekend, maybe on the 4th of July, we'll have somebody out. But with the cutbacks, it's going to be very, very limited as to what we'll be responding to.
Is it Marine Patrol, is it just for waters like Cook Canal and so on, or would that
No,
include
we have
lakes?
3 distinct bodies of water. Actually, Chief, I'll let you handle that.
We have 92 square miles of water in Mason County, 300 miles of saltwater waterfront, and the Hood Canal, Puget Sound, and 200 lakes. Obviously, all 200 lakes we can't get a boat to, but.
All right, I guess I'm up. One of the questions that we had was about how many deputies that we actually have working at any given time. So this is representative of the shift schedule that our folks are in the process of bidding right now for 2018. And what our deputies work is a 2-squad system. So this is representative of our gold squad schedule. And then we also have a green squad, and they work 4 days on, 4 days off. So it's a 4 on, 4 off. For 4 days, we'll have the gold squad on. They cover a 24-hour period. The next 4 days while they're off, we have the green squad on, and they cover a 24-hour period. And that's how that schedule works. They work 11-hour shifts. And you can see up there that between the hours of about 4 in the morning and 8 in the morning, we have 4 people scheduled to work for the county. The rest of the day, we have 8 people scheduled to work for the county. And what our minimum staffing is at this time is 2 people north end of the county, 2 people in the south end of the county, and then a supervisor covering. So probably one of the important things to recognize when you look at a schedule like this is it looks pretty good in this state where it's nice and pristine, and the reality of life and scheduling and people and all the other things that come in have not hit it yet. But the reality is we've usually got about 10 to 20% of our personnel not on the schedule at any given time. And that could be because they're on modified duty for an injury that they received in the line of duty. It could be because they're on sick leave for themselves or their family. They could be on vacation. They might not be on the schedule because they are gone to mandatory training for a special unit. They could be in court, testifying in court on a court case and not able to be working the street at the time. So there is a whole host of things that end up resulting in us never having a pristine shift with all the people that we have up there. We shoot to have 5 people on during the busiest times of the day. We do drop down to 4 people between 4 and 8, and the reason for that is because we only get about 2% of our calls for service during that time. And so we have a real low call volume at that time, and we can afford to drop down to a few less personnel.
I think it'll be on your other questions. There was a question asked, and we looked it up, and it was, I'm sure probably catch my name. It's in 1985, 1986, right there somewhere. 3,500 calls a year for service. 2018, over 21,000 calls a year for service for this many people. Well over a 400% increase in that time, with only 7 more staff than we had in 19 or 7 or 9 more staff than we had in 1985. So you're looking at 3,500 calls for service to 21,000 calls for service. and considering the types of calls that we're having now that we didn't have then, or the complexity of the issues that are going on now, 400% increase with a very minimal staff increase since 1985.
So you're going to get into those types of calls later, right?
We can, I think, if there are these questions, we can keep moving through.
Yeah, they were.
Do you track which of your calls are to vacant buildings as opposed to occupied? We have something close to 30% of the housing units in Mason County are seasonally occupied.
What types of calls are you referring to?
Any of your 21,000, and I don't know what they would be, vandalism, trespass. I've seen data that
Suspicious.
says vacant buildings take more emergency services, fire and police, than occupied buildings, and I wonder.
I would say that we don't have, we do get lots of calls to vacant buildings, but typically, for example, crime is very cyclical in our county. We know when it's going to go up and go down based on certain things. So we may not get a lot of burglary calls in Lake Cushman during the winter. Well, that's because everybody who owns homes in Lake Cushman are somewhere else off at their other homes. But in spring, we get a big spike of reports of burglaries that have occurred up there, thefts that have occurred up there, because all the folks that are gone during the winter have come home to their summer place and now have discovered this. And so technically, is it unoccupied? Yes, but it's not by the time that we get the report. And there's 1,000 permutations of nuances that we could talk about, but that might be a challenge.
I would like to talk further with you about data and how to sort of cull out the crime related to buildings being vacant.
I don't know that we have a specific code that relates to a vacant building versus an occupied one. Yeah, the question for us is really, is there a crime or is there not a crime? The occupancy is not necessarily something that's something.
I think to your point, if it is an empty or vacant building, it might require a few more assets because we're not talking to a property owner to say, yes, Mike, should be nobody there. You might require more people to come in and clear an occupied or vacant building. So it might require more resources.
We do also respond to over 1,000 alarm calls a year, which many of those would be unoccupied. And
Was
very
there a
few.
change? Was there a change to the response to alarm calls?
Yes,
I
we
seem
just
to
had-
recall something. Could you explain that?
I'll let
Yes, we did just change our alarm response policy. We have informed our folks that they will respond to alarms if it's the homeowner has notified us that it was as a result of an actual crime. If it's a distress alarm, so a lot of the alarms, it comes out just as a distress, a medical issue possibly, or something else. We'll respond to those, and we'll respond to others as the supervisors kind of cull out the details and determine that it's something that lends us to believe that we should respond. But all other alarms, we are not responding to at this time.
And how many officers are responding to a single call, such as for suspicious activity?
Generally, at least 2 people will respond to an alarm call. So anytime that we have an alarm call, if we have 1,000 alarm calls in a year and they're spread all over the county, and we have a 2-deputy response, that ends up tying up a significant amount of our time.
And do they ever go out singly?
On occasion, they do.
I have a question. I've wondered this for years. In the newspaper, you can see, the list of calls, whatever. Vehicle prowl. That means somebody's breaking into your vehicle, casing your vehicle. What does that mean?
Technically, a vehicle prowl is when something has been stolen from your vehicle. Doesn't necessarily mean that they broke a window to get in, the door might have been unlocked, usually is unlocked, but a vehicle prowl tends to mean that they've stolen something.
But if somebody was walking around looking in windows, that would probably come out as a suspicious and not a prowl.
So Casey, you mentioned you were going to get into the different types of crimes, et cetera, in the county?
We're going to, not the different types, we're just answering the questions that we were given on the list. So I think some of your questions are going to be answered in the slides because we took your questions and wrote them down and wanted to go through them.
We didn't all see the questions.
Oh, okay.
so-
The ones that we were given by the group are on here on the list, so we'll try to get through those, were the ones that we were given to answer. This collision took place out on Johns Prairie Road. Interestingly enough, on this particular one, a year before, one almost to the day, a year before, I assisted a trooper with that very same driver in near the same area, and we had to break the window out of the car to get the person out back on the road, and this one, they hit that truck head on right in front of PD. So the driver now was killed in this fatality accident. The guy driving the big truck was significant injuries, but it's interesting how we continue to deal with the same people over and over and over again.
Can I say something? We did specify questions for the sheriff, so, and usually we have a big conversation and ask a lot of questions, but I'm going to request our members not to ask any more questions until you guys finish, so that we do get to everything that we sent to you.
Okay, that would work great.
So no more questions from the
Okay,
audience until the end.
one thing, I'm gonna pass to Casey a copy of our notice that went out to everybody about the meeting, because this is kind of what, it's another way of looking at things.
Oh, okay, well, we had 3 sets of questions sent to
No,
us.
this is not
so-
what, this,
Okay,
I was going to cover this map real quickly. This is our zones, and the zone concept is not new to law enforcement, but it's new to Mason County in the last few years. And basically what it's saying is, depending on the number of people that we have, a deputy would be responsible. Let's take an example of South Zone 1. Any non-emergency issue that's going on that isn't a 911 type call, the citizens in that area would have one deputy to talk to, so that they would have one person that they know, hey, this is the person who's kind of the expert on what's going on in our area. Now, that deputy may be responding to calls all over the place, and if they can, during discretionary time, if they're not responding to calls, they're supposed to be in that zone patrolling. So that's the way the zone concept works, and as you look at the map real quickly, just remember, our county is very unique. I've worked all over the state, 25 years with the State Patrol. I've worked in Eastern Washington on Snoqualmie Pass for 10 years, up in Everett, and worked in Spokane and Wenatchee in different areas. Mason County is very unique. We can be in Hoodsport and get a crash on the North Shore, and it takes us 45 minutes to get there. And I can see the wreck, but we have to go around the body of water. So that's one of the unique challenges that this county offers to us. And there is no interstate to where you can go quickly on a straight road like there was in Kittitas County where I worked. You could run at 100 miles an hour to get from one location to another without endangering yourself or others. This county, you cannot do that because of the roads and the type of roads, and you know that as well as I do because you live here. It's a rather unique place to patrol. Puget Sound and Hood Canal, but you can't get to from one to the other unless you plan on driving an awful long time in a boat. So we got to pull the boat out, because if we have the boat in the Hood Canal and we have an emergency in the Puget Sound, we got to go down and pull it out, trailer it, launch it, and then get it going. So those are some of the unique things that we deal with, and the demographics that we deal with in this county.
Can you go back real quick? That big, huge white area up in the left, that's all your National Olympic Park lands that we still are in our jurisdiction, that search and rescue activities, criminal activities, we're responsible for hitting those primitive roads and patrolling those. So it is a large chunk. Nobody's assigned to it permanently, but it is part of our patrolling strategies.
We had search and rescue assets up there just this morning,
So
getting some people off the mountain.
A few years ago, this became a big issue, response times, all this stuff when I first got here. We brought in a person from King County that says, I'm an expert in this area, I'm gonna come in, I'm gonna ride and tell you all about it. Knock yourself out, come on in. So the retired major, great guy, lives down here now, came out and rode, and he rode a number of days, and he came back and he says, well, Sheriff, I got news for you. There's a problem with this county. And I said, and the problem is, he says, the problem is that there's places in this county that you can't get there from here. He realized that it's not a straight shot right across the roads, and when he had to cross all these bodies of water and go around, he said, I don't have an answer for you at this point out of King County because it's too complicated the way you guys have to answer. So the bodies of water make a difference.
And we are a little bit over 1,000 square miles, Olympic National Park and the forest, or the National Forest. We have 2 prisons. A lot of people don't know that we have 2 prisons. We have one in the north end, a woman's facility up there with state prisons. And then we, of course, have the Shelton Penitentiary. And we have a lot of area to cover. To answer this question, what is the average response time to an incident reported to 911? Lieutenant Adams will take the rest of it.
So this is actually an interesting question, and I like it. If you go down to the end of this hall and you take a right is the classroom that I used to teach in for many years up here, teaching criminal justice classes. And so response times to calls and how you structure patrol and those things are items that we talk about all the time with the folks going through the class. So just a couple things to talk about here. There's some physical limitations to answering this question, and then there's kind of some philosophical ones, and they really kind of blend together. So here it is, I'll throw it out there. One, we have a system that's called Spillman, and Spillman tracks all our calls for service. When we get a call into the dispatch center, they put the call in, and that starts the clock running. And then our dispatch center will put that call out to the deputies, and the deputies will respond to that call in the order that they believe that it ranks with all the other calls that are pending at the time. So if we have a whole screen full of calls that are pending, that call will sit in a pending status for a long time if it's not a high priority call. So response time just in that regard is kind of skewed. Also, we have many calls because our deputies handle a lot of the follow-up investigations and handle multi-day contacts with suspects and victims and witnesses and all of these things. That call will rotate for them day after day. It will shut down at the end of the day, it will pop up the next day when they come back, and they will continue to work this call. Unfortunately, in our Spillman system, that call response time continues to run during that entire process. So again, just from the limitations of the system, it doesn't provide us very good data on precisely how much time is being spent on that, how long it takes to respond to a call. The other part, the somewhat philosophical or the collegiate way of looking at it, is there's a couple different policing models that you look at. You have reactive policing models, and then you have proactive policing models. Reactive policing models tend to occur when you have more calls for service than can be handled readily by the number of officers you have available to handle. Meaning that we have so many calls that come in for service and few enough deputies that there is always a pile of calls waiting. So you don't get a true accurate sense of what a response time would be if they could respond directly to the call, because the calls sometimes just sit and wait while they're dealing with crimes against persons, court order violations, domestic violence, assaults, accidents, all the other things that would take a higher priority perhaps to a burglary with no suspect information that has been pending. And so for all of those reasons, we don't spend a whole lot of time and effort trying to track what the response times would be, because our deputies are literally prioritizing the calls, handling one after another as fast as they can, and it's just not really it's not a number that really provides us much meaningful information.
I will add to that, the philosophical structure of this office under Sheriff years ago was to establish a North Precinct. The idea was part and parcel is if you can get deputies into their work zones at the beginning of their shift, they start handling their calls quicker. Before that precinct was there, they would come down to the courthouse. They would get their roll call briefings, get their information, then they'd be shipped back off up to the north end. We've alleviated some of that response times by putting those precinct concepts in place. Same with the evidence. We put an evidence system up there, which requires a whole bunch of coding requirements, alarm systems, etc. That was to keep them on the street quicker. They get their evidence into the system, they're back out on the road again. These are things that did not exist but for a few years ago until that precinct was put in place in its existing structure. So the deputies now can come right into their work zones, the computers in the cars tell them what's already pending, and in the case where it's a hot call and in progress, they don't even go to the precinct. They just get in their car, they see that, and off they go directly to. So I think to the lieutenant's point is a lot of variances, a lot of nuances on trying to establish what an average response time is.
The other issue with that, I'll throw in there, and we didn't have them when I first came here, and we did in my other county for years, but we have cell phones in our cars. And as a lieutenant in another county, oftentimes when all the shift deputies were tied up and sergeants were tied up, as a shift commander, I just punch in on a cell phone. We have a thing called a parrot. You just push the button and you can talk. You don't take your hands off. It's all legal. And I can answer 3 or 4 calls when I drive from the north end of the county down to the south end of the county to pick up the paperwork. I'm picking up 3 or 4 calls because sometimes they're a yes/no answer. People will call for the strangest things, and it's not a law enforcement call. It'll be some kind of an animal call that has nothing to do with the civil issue or whatever. We can answer that. I can pick those calls off the screens. When I first came here, we didn't have screens that we could look at to vary the calls. Only dispatch had them when we didn't have phones. You'd have to drive to a telephone somewhere on the side of the road and then sit there and wait, and then they have to explain to you. Now we can look at the screens, hit the number, call, answer the question. And so on that side of it, it goes much quicker. It's much more efficient too than what was before. But to measure that when you're answering 3 calls, when you're on the way to win 1 call, is really, really tough. Or when we're all tied up on what I call an all-skate, when we are all on an issue that's going on, a major issue somewhere that's happening. When the school issue happened up in Belfair, we were all tied up there. Other calls don't stop coming in just because you're all tied up. And until you clear that building, they pend all those calls. So as soon as you clear that after you've been for 6 hours, imagine what that looks like when those calls start coming in and you're trying to cover all those. So again, to Travis's point, there's so many variables to just say how long it takes to get to each call. It just isn't a number that is a measurable or value. Go ahead, next one.
All right, so the next question that we sort of explored was who are our comparable counties and why? So let me give you the more direct answer before I go on. Our traditional comparable counties are Qualam, Cowlitz, Grays Harbor, Skagit, and Lewis. Sometimes Island and Jefferson are thrown in or taken out, depending on what circumstances might have to be. So that's kind of a direct answer for you. The more indirect answer would be comparable to what and for what reason. And the only reason I say that is because if we're referring to comparables for collective bargaining reasons, well, that is something that our Deputies Guild discusses and negotiates with the Board of County Commissioners, who negotiates those contracts, and that's a process that goes on between them, and that's an economics issue typically. There's some parity in size and other things, but it's economics and where those other units are. Sometimes those lower paid ones try to get argued in by the county commissioners, lowers that economic argument a little bit. Obviously, the deputies guilds want to throw in the ones that get paid a lot, builds up their side. That's kind of the way it goes. But we also have to look at, in our comparables, are things directly comparable? If you want to talk about jails, for example, I think we talk about jail money later, how much budget is allocated for jails and patrol operations and things. But Skagit County is one of our comparables. Well, Skagit County has a jail that has a budget of $31 million. So they're one of our comparable counties, but is it a comparable in that regard? Patrol operations are the same thing. You may have Lewis County, which is a much bigger county, but they have fewer commissioned patrol deputies out on the road. But they also have, I believe it's 13 cities, and all of them have police forces that are available to augment those patrol forces. So if you look at, they have a few less deputies than we do, but we have only one incorporated city and no other backup out there in the county. Again, is that a comparable? So I'll throw out there, I gave you what is considered to be traditionally our comparable counties, but you really have to identify specifically what it is that you want to compare and the reason why you're comparing it in order to make a comparison that makes sense, something that's apples to apples. Oh, and did we have another one?
I mean, same thing.
Oh, yeah. I know a couple eyebrows raised on the Skagit County $31 million. Please understand that they just built a brand new jail because their jail 4 years was in the same place our jail was. They had just gone through the entire process and just completed that construction. So their populations, their staffing numbers, the cost of doing that jail is significant compared to what was just using it. So that's direct result of a brand new jail.
So the other question on there, we snuck another one in on that slide around. How does our overtime compare to that comparable counties? In all honesty, we didn't have time to call them up and ask them what their specific overtime budgets were between last week and now. A lot of other information to get together. The one point that I would make is, for all the reasons that I just discussed about comparing apples to apples, comparing the overtime budgets is not necessarily a very clean analysis directly one to the other. One of the other things that we would probably point out here is the difference between operational overtime versus contract overtime. We often have issues where people say, well, the deputies are making a ton of money because they're making all of this overtime. Well, to some extent, yes, that is true, but keep in mind that we have many contracts that come into the sheriff's office, whether it's Forest Service patrol during the summertime, whether it's contracts with a number of the communities that we have. Some of the special events, our deputies get contracted overtime hours to go work. DUI, traffic safety, a lot of those things. So a significant amount of the overtime that is actually used for deputies and paid to them is contract overtime, not necessarily budgeted overtime.
And so when you see some of these deputies with the dollars that they've earned for the year, please understand, they volunteered their own time on Saturdays or evenings or Sundays or their days off, and they went to volunteer these contracts. So there is that difference versus operational. At the end of a shift, you get behind what appears to be a drunk driver, you stop driver is in fact under the influence, and now we're 4 hours into overtime to process that DUI into the next shift. So we do make those distinctions.
Next photograph, that's at the Washington State Patrol Academy. It's a Quantities law enforcement camp. This year would have been my 16th year involved in that camp. Chief Sperling, for a few years, was a camp director when he was assigned to the academy as a trooper. We bring numerous kids through. That's a small group there, usually around 30 kids that we bring through that thing each year. The reason I bring that up is it's so interesting that after having 16 years, one of our local troopers is a kid that was standing there in that classroom. He's a high school kid. A number of other people. I always love to point out we have one kid that went through there is now a physician. We've been doing this a long time, so after 16 years of this, a number of those kids are now FBI agents, and it's somewhere in the area of over 80% of the kids that attend that camp end up somewhere involved in the positive side of the law enforcement business, whether they're juvenile counselors, probation, whatever, troopers, U.S. Marshals, kids that come out of there, all kinds of that over the last 16 years. It's another one of those programs that we've involved ourselves in statewide with a number of other agencies.
Along with the Explorer program that we are involved with fire departments so that kids can get involved in that. The high schools, we do multiple presentations. Many of the staff also coach different activities throughout the county.
Next.
Holy cow, they stacked
all
me,
you.
didn't they? All right, so the question was, how does the base pay of the MCSO deputies compare to that of our comparable counties? So there's a document that goes out that the counties can purchase and the bargaining units can. I can't remember, anybody know, Kirk or somebody? All the counties report in and then they compile all this data. So I took that from that. But basically our comparable counties up there, I put the low end of the pay scale for deputies on the left, the high end for the right, and then I put the average down on the bottom down there. And then I put where MCSO deputies are right below that. So you can kind of see that as compared to the average. Mason County, our deputies are pretty much right in the middle of the pack right now for that. The one thing that should be pointed out is that the base pay that you will see reported does not paint the entire picture for pay for law enforcement personnel. Every county has different constructs of different things that they want to pay their deputies for, whether it's special assignment pay for being assigned to specialty investigators or instructors in certain areas, whether it's firearms or defensive tactics or other areas. It doesn't factor in how much the deputies have to pay for out-of-pocket for medical, for example. That can be a big swing of many hundreds of dollars depending on what package the deputy is getting. There's all kinds of other incentive pays that are built into the various county constructs, whether it's accreditation pay, pay for higher levels of education, what their longevity package is, whether it's a straight dollar amount per month or it's a percentage of their pay. And every county kind of builds that up different. So while you can compare base pay to base pay, you would literally have to go to every single county, find out what's in their contract, how they construct that pay package for their personnel.
The difference is now, and remember, this has just been in the last few years that we've been into the into the average. When I worked here years ago, it was about $1,200 a month to go next door and work. And for over, probably, I'm guessing, I don't know, Jim was here during that time and I left. There was a difference of about 20 years where the deputies were thousands of dollars a month behind everybody else. It's only been in the last few years, but what that's done for us, it's finally allowed us to quit to be the full-time revolving door. When I went to Thurston County, I think that year 9 deputies from here went to Thurston County along with me. And at one point, a large percentage of all the deputies in Thurston County had been at Mason County because the pay was so much higher to go everywhere else. Now that pay has been up to where it's at least reasonable, we haven't seen near the exits that we had in the past. And that saves you, well, about $130,000 a year. Every time you go to hire a deputy, they go somewhere else, you just dumped over $100,000, about $130,000 into them. And you keep getting further behind and the other agencies keep getting further ahead. Recently, with the unstableness of our counties, we've had a number of deputies now that are on other people's lists because they're just concerned that they're even going to be able to have a job with the way things keep dropping. So we have a lot of people moved out on other people's lists again now. But we hadn't had that turnover. Once we had reasonable pay, you're spending twice as much trying to get half as much here for many, many years. And now it's stabilized a little bit. The other thing Travis pointed out, when I went next door, I get a tremendous amount more in pay because of having where you have your college degree, you have a bachelor's degree, master's degree, pays an awful lot more money in those other counties as an added incentive on top of this. So that pay variable that they have in those areas can be a great deal different.
And then I will say, having sat on both sides of the table, representing management and the other side representing unions, you always try to have your bracket get right to the middle. You don't want to be at the top, you don't want to be at the bottom. We're sitting in the middle, which is appropriate for both sides of the table if you look at it that way.
I would throw one other point out there, though, that I think is important for us to remember is that there is a big difference between comparable and competitor, however. If you look at the list of our comparables, we don't lose people to Tuolumne County and Cowlitz and Island. We don't lose people to there. We lose people to Pierce County, Thurston County, Olympia PD, Bremerton Police Department, Kitsap. Competitors, those who are right next door in our region, have far more of an impact on us than the comparables. And so if we are not somewhere in a competitive range with those folks that are within a 20-minute driving distance of where our people are living already, we have a significant retention problem. So while comparables is an interesting and halfway workable way to look at it, competitors have far more impact on our day-to-day operations and whether or not we can keep personnel.
Our people do well in those other counties. I went to work in Thurston County and was there for years and was the great beneficiary for many, many years of Mason County training people and us taking them. And to come back and to see that happening when I came back here was really challenging to see that. And now that we finally got a little bit of stability, we're not losing them the same. But most of our people who've gone to other agencies have become agency administrators and figureheads within those agencies. So the people that we're hiring are great. It's just that giving them away to other agencies. Other agencies love us for that, but it had stabilized for quite some time. And now we're looking at the instability in our economics. People just aren't sure if they're going to have jobs, so they're putting in other places again.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're about 2/3 of the way through our presentation, so just
Okay.
heads up.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Lieutenant Adams, continue, it says.
No, I think we said that.
Oh, whoa. This, well, I'll just Chief Sperling will talk about, this is another area that Mason County went into ahead of everybody else, or some people were in, of training our people in leadership. And right now, I can tell you that our agency leadership and the instructors for most of these classes, that all the other areas of the state are looking to join this and do this program. And it comes through, mainly through Mason County, but this is one of the gold classes, and Chief Sperling and Chief Osterhout and Lieutenant Adams are all instructors.
When I first got here, the sheriff and undersheriff asked us, because I was an instructor through the International Association of Chiefs of Police, with the leadership program that they had gotten and adopted from West Point, which is a 120-hour leadership course that they provide to their West Point students. On staff, we had two individuals, both Chief Osterhout and Lieutenant Adams, who both have master's degrees in leadership, and they joined me, and we started this GOLD program, which is a gold standard leadership development for officers. And we take that 120-hour class and teach it in 80 hours. There's approximately 612 pages of material, 22 case studies, and 31 lessons that are provided in that. And we've opened it up to our regional partners. Now, if you go to the Criminal Justice Training Center and take this same class, you as an agency have to pay $3,000 per officer. We offered it to all our regional partners for free. So they were able to, smaller agencies, get their people trained. We have over 100 people in 5 different sheriff's offices, which is our regional partner, which is Pacific County, Lewis County, Grace Harbor County, Thurston County, and Mason County. We have them trained up now, almost every single leader, and we consequently have other areas of the state, such as Spokane, asking us to come over and teach. We just can't do it. We're going to keep it within our own area. But this is just an idea of some of the things that we're involved with as well.
All right, my last slide. This is just the exact same comparison on the corrections deputy side as you just saw for the patrol deputy side. You can see that MCSO is just a little bit below the average of those particular comparables right there. We didn't put it on this slide, but I would just point out that the variability of some of those specialty pays and other things that are calculated into that base pay calculation are just as varied, if not more so, on the correction side of the house as they are for patrol. So again, while this kind of gives you a snapshot based on a base level for comparables, it doesn't really give you the entire picture as compared to the contract.
I just photographed one of the varying calls we go to at the airport. We've added planes, actually just I think that 2 weeks before I took over as sheriff, we had one not quite leave the runway out here and ended up in a fatality. So we respond to all types of different situations. One of the first guest speakers that I brought down here years ago was a guy, it was called the GO team, where they have airplane crashes, and we had a couple issues. So he came down from a national level and actually taught a class on responses to downed aircraft. So that's another one that we covered. Chief Hansen.
Okay, so one of the questions is how many corrections deputies work in our jail? And as of today, we have 28 total. That's counting myself and the second in charge, which is the lieutenant, and 26 corrections deputies. Plus, in addition to the 28, we have 3 what we call community service officers. And 2 of them are assigned to an alternative sentencing program, and the other one is one of the control operator helpers. And then we have 2 support staff. We have 1 support staff that does full-time warrants and protection order entries and modifications and management. And the other support staff is our records support, which we get inundated with inmate requests for information and public disclosure stuff and prisoner billing. It's a lot of work. So anyhow, that's what we have as of today. What is the average daily cost to keep somebody in jail? So our daily cost for 2017 was $102 per day. That dollar amount is figured from our annual total budget, which is $4.3 million at the end of 2017 is where it's settled. You take the amount of annual prisoner bed days, actually I take the revenue, because we do bring in some revenue at the jail from the city of Shelton, We subtract the revenue from our total budget. Then we take the amount of prisoner bed days that we had in a year, meaning if I had an average daily population of 100, just for conversation's sake, we take 100 times 365 days. That give me, whether 365, I don't know, quick math, 36500 annual prisoner bed days. Then you take that dollar amount from your budget minus the revenue, take that dollar amount, divide it by the annual prisoner bed days, and that gives you a daily bed rate. So, how does that compare with some of our other jurisdictions? And those 5 other entities up there were pretty easy for me to get some information from. So Cowlitz, you see, was at 91.59, Highland was 110, Kitsap was 91, Thurston was 111, Lewis County is 98. So, we're right in the average there. The thing that people ask me all the time is, well, how come ours is 102 and not 98 or 91? Well, a lot of it is dependent on the population of the jail, the inmate population. So if I have more inmates in the jail, the cost, because you have fixed costs, the more inmates, it's divided out farther, right? So if we have more inmates in the jail, the cost per day would be less. So the fixed costs are things like staff, staff benefits and pay, electricity, natural gas, facilities, ER&R stuff for computers, they're all the fixed costs. Those don't go away no matter whether I have 10 inmates in the jail or I have 100 inmates in the jail. Any questions on that?
We're not allowed to ask questions.
Oh, that's right. Thank you for reminding me.
Trick question.
Sorry. Okay, next. Oh, Chief Eric.
Due to the logistics of our county, I did put in on this, the state patrol and the city that actually went up 2 commissioned FTEs and we went down 4 for the year. We have 81 total commissioned FTEs versus Grays Harbor that has 9 cities and has 146. Our budget overall for this year is $12.3 million. Last year we started with 13.9. We ended up with 13, and we have 6.8 million that is in our patrol budget, 4.2 in our jail. So we have 6.8 in our patrol, 7.2 in Lewis County for their patrol. And I think it's important to note that was 7.2 million in patrol in Lewis County. They have 39 commissioned FTEs. 6.1 million for Cowlitz and 6.5 million for Clallam with 34 commissioned FTEs, and 6.9 for Grays Harbor with 38 commissioned FTEs. So we have 50 at 6.8. The jail, we have 4.2 million in budget. We have Skagit that's not comparable because of the new facility. Their budget is 31.6. Lewis County is 7.3. They also have a new facility, a much larger facility. 4.2 for Clallam and 4.4 for Grays Harbor. Our budget that was adopted on 12/19 is 12.3 million. 10 million of that are contracted CBAs and benefits of 10.1 million. There's almost $1 million in inmate costs. We have 500,000 in nursing. We have 175,000 in food service, and we have other costs related to inmates of $869,000. We also have $918,000 of our budget that is for vehicle payments that we make to our own department, ER&R, of over $500,000. And then we have other lease payments we make on other vehicles that we've made so that we don't have capital costs. So we also have $300,000 in MACECOM costs and $60,000 in Spillman. And it's a little misleading to say we have an IT deputy. It's an infrastructure deputy. It's taking care of our video system at the jail, our evidence facility, that he was just working on that, reconstruction on fatalities, on traffic accidents, and taking care of every deputy, corrections or patrol has several pieces of equipment. Continually works on radios, sector, and the Spillman infrastructure, software systems that they have to use. But it's kind of amazing. We don't have any control of the MaceCom $300,000 we pay, or the $60,000 in Spillman, or the $30,000 in other software costs. Those all together with the vehicles is almost $1 million. And our budget of the $400,000 left, there's $80,000 in internet connectivity, cell phones, copier leases. We have replacement of equipment that we have to do. All the radios or computers, if there's something wrong with them, we have to replace. So that leaves $12.3 million, $100,000 left in supplies. Comparison to previous years, I think I spoke to last year, we started out at 13.9. We had 13 at the end of July with a $900,000 reduction. And since most of our budget is out of 100,000 supplies, if is wages and benefits, then there was positions that we had filled, that we were trying to fill, that we had to eliminate. Our budget ended up for 16 at 14.7. The previous year, it was 14.5. So we have a considerable reduction in our budget, which since most of it is staff and people, that's where that change was made. But all the contracts that we have for the 500,000 nursing and all the outsourcing contracts, all the collective bargaining contracts were signed by the commission and negotiated by the commission, the CBAs, not the nursing. But I do know that we have some very, very experienced and capable people that operate our patrol and our jail, and they always look for ways to make efficiencies and cut costs. And when they do negotiate contracts that the commission sign off of, I know they're giving them the very best that they can. Even in our outsourcing, we looked at a lot less expensive and less liability of a jail facility in Lewis County than Nisqually. I know that we didn't speak very long, but that's been an issue since we're on that cost, that we had to make a decision that the sheriff and undersheriff met with the commission the 1st of February of 15 to find out a way that we could house inmates because we didn't have enough female correction staff. We didn't have enough space, that we met for months before we actually executed mid-April of sending some of our females inmates out. I put a slide on here too for sheriff's pay because that's something that has had considerable discussion. I think of the 6 comparable counties, our sheriff that gets paid at $95,000 a year and has, I even put that he has 50 commissioned FTEs. Lewis County has 39, 108 total, but every single one of these sheriffs make considerably more than ours. I also put a distribution of taxes because I think it's important to know how the county is funded by taxes, whether they're grants, whether they're contracts with most of the income is for taxes, and real estate taxes is something that has been an ongoing education as to where the money goes. So I put a distribution on there because actually the fire districts used to be the same as the roads and the general fund, but now they're a little bit higher.
And the last slides are just some photographs of some of the activities that we're involved with, which would be the Special Operation Response Team that does rescues, including off of the Steel Bridge in different locations. Search and rescue as well up in the Olympic National Park. This is some of our people doing a rescue at the bottom of the high steel bridge, which happens. It's become, for whatever reason, it's become popular on the internet, and people are going up there just to see it, even from other countries. We found a drone that had crashed, and we're trying to return it, and we've recovered photos, and they're speaking foreign languages on there, so. This is some of the pictures of the fire, the brush fire that we dealt with. That's a trailer. After, there's one of our patrol deputies. This was a critical photo for us because 2 weeks prior, our deputy was in an older patrol car. We had just gotten him into the new patrol car. The collision that occurred, he would have died in the older patrol car because it didn't have the safety features that this one. He walked away with a large gash on his head, but walked away in this car with the safer equipment. And you know, his wife and family are very grateful for that type of thing. Some of the activities that we're involved with, this is when we went to Shelton High School and helped teach all of their staff on active shooter and what would happen in that type of environment. And our staff was involved with the city helping them. And that wraps it up.
Chief, one of the things you could speak to is, one thing you're very active with, everyone is on public information and on how to keep yourself safe or make our community safer. And Chief regularly puts things out on our webpage that we redid and speaks to groups. And we have a lieutenants too that speak to groups about neighborhood watches. And so
We have a lot of activities going on, and we do our best to try to keep people educated.
In that respect, how do you measure your own effectiveness, say, in traffic safety and crime rates? And how important is it to the office to actually be talking about that?
That's a great question. And one of the things that we did a few years ago is we purchased some software that allows us to track the crime stats and the data. Let me give you an example. When we first opened up the precinct in Belfair, and this was a 30-year in the making, and the sheriff really worked hard on it as well. The year before we got the precinct open, there were 595 burglaries. I'm sorry, that was for the whole county. The North Precinct had 254 burglaries just in that area before the precinct was opened. The precinct was opened, officers' presence, it dropped to 149 burglaries. In 1 year, we dropped by 100, a little bit more than 100. The next year we stayed, we were right at 150, but the year after that we went to 99. So in a 3-year period, we went 155 less victim families to burglary. That is really important to us, and that data is mined on the program that we purchased. We can also see real time where the crimes are happening, so if there's a pattern, we, instead of having an analyst, because we don't have the support staff to sit down and analyze all of the crime stats, we use the computer program to do that for us, and we can see, hey, this area is being hit at this time, let's get a deputy into that area during that time, and is there any consistency from one crime to the next that will lead us to know who it is? And those are critical elements, so we have to measure our success. We have to be able to go back and use a critical eye to see whether what we're doing is working, because if it's not, we got to change what we're doing.
Since there's only about 10 minutes left, you guys, let's just take 2 questions instead of asking the questions that we had planned as follow-up. So I'll give a 5-minute warning and then a 30-second warning to keep us at our end schedule, because I know that you guys are busy. So 2 questions. Who wants to go? Michelle?
Yeah, I think this was one that we talked about doing because this is important to us in our budget study. And we recall from the hearing where the 2018 budget was adopted, there was a lot of very vocal concern about the budget process this past year. And we're wondering, going forward, if you have particular thoughts about how that can be improved.
I'll start and I'll let the undersheriff, because he's handled this most over the years. The biggest challenge that I think we've had in this county for years is it's always waited until the last minute. We had changes on the last day of the last hour for us, and to make $150,000 changes overnight is nearly impossible. I think the biggest thing that would help our county is if we were lined out like other counties and we had goals and objectives set for our county, so all the county entities knew which direction we were going. Actual spelled out goals and objectives would help us. waiting till the last minute. This is I think I've been here longer than anybody else now going through these budgets. We're the last county around to do these things. I've worked for other counties and it's done months ahead of time, the budget's in, it's over with, and we're at the last day, at the last hour making adjustments. And there were several things this year that I think could have been done much more ahead of time and much earlier. And when you wait till the last minute, I've got a saying for that, but it's not a great one. It doesn't work out well. And look at the successful counties. This is the big one for me. You look at successful counties and do what they're doing. And that's why the other counties in the state are done before we are, and the budgets are in. Not every single one of them. I talk to the other sheriffs that are done months ahead of us. And they don't go through these, they don't hop through these issues. Jim, you want to comment on it? You've handled it more than anybody.
I just look up there and I see those things, the mission, the vision, the values, core values, objectives, goals, strategies. Much of our staff, and some of you may have heard this before, so forgive me, but much of our staff grew up in the military or raised in the military. We understand having strategic objectives, a higher mission, an adjacent mission, lower subordinate unit missions, but they're always aligned to one final objective, what you're trying to accomplish. And I think the frustration for a lot of us is, where do you want us to go? And then we, being the lion's share of the budgetary process and the largest cost in the county, if we have an objective of where we're going and a 3 to 5 year window plan to do it, we can help align our budgetary process and planning to that strategy. But without that, it's Lord of the Flies, and we all grab it. We can grab when we can grab it, and of course, I don't think anybody would fault the sheriff or his staff for advocating in the most strongest terms possible for public safety, because that's what we're hired to do, and we will argue to that extent. Understanding there's competing interests by every other elected official and department head, and the board has tough challenges to look at the entire picture. We get all that. But without something to plan to, it's hard to plan. And I think that would be the biggest thing going forward. We've tried to say, have those hard discussions a little bit earlier in the year instead of waiting till the fall to have them. I think a good constructive understanding of the preliminary budget process. RCW is clear on what the preliminary budget is. It's the elected officials' opportunity to say what they believe they need to run their office. It doesn't mean it's what they're going to get, but it's their opportunity to say what they think they need. And so the preliminary process should be a bit ugly, but that should spur the ongoing debate that would take afterwards. And I think the involvement of department heads and elected officials who are the subject matter experts at the ground level with their respective missions and objectives involved, more time needs to be put that out. We have waited over the years and had a very hapstance. We have a meeting, then we don't have a meeting, or we delay meetings, and before you know it, we're right down to that last minute where we have a crunch adoption and a lot of emotion and a lot of anger and a lot of angst. I really think that the best way moving forward is, what is the county's vision? Where are we going? What are we trying to do? What is the mission? How are we going to get there? And then have those departments and electeds align their budgets to that bigger picture. And if that's up front, you know that's the direction, you're less likely to go in there as Lord of the Flies and get whatever you can get. So that's my
So we need to properly plan.
I talked about that as, I taught elementary school. It's just tough to figure out. The elementary school teachers get it. At the beginning of the year, the objective is to get these things done by the end of the year. You backfill and plan out how you're going to get there by the end of the year. You don't wait until May to start teaching math, okay? You start at the beginning of the year, and any good teacher will tell you that generally by the time you should be done by May. Really, May and June are pretty much, write them off because of the weather, but your main course better be done by then. But you plan that out. I look at all the other offices around, they plan that out, they know where they're going, and that has been a huge issue for us for coming into this in 2007. We asked, what are the goals and objectives of the county? We still don't have them. That's very difficult for us.
Excuse me, sir, we have time for one more question.
Go ahead.
One
quick, I hope. Does your department have its own strategic plan, long-range plan?
Yes. And we, every year, we're asked by the county commission to produce that. We produced it anyway. We have not sat down totally yet and done our 2018 goals because we didn't know until just recently what we were going to end up for staffing and what we were going to have until we could plan out 2018. But every year, we have set goals and objectives for our office. And I'm going to miss Jim as our undersheriff because the first thing when I decided to run for this office, he wrote out a list of things and said, I'll do this if these are the things that we can work on, that all of us for years when I left, they were on those lists that we need to get done. We've always had what we want to get done planned out, and we plan them out in priority order and move on them.
So you submit that kind of thing to the county commissioners, right?
It's an
Yes.
internal document.
It's an internal document.
Right.
It's on our websites.
To your,
Whether or not they act on it is a
Well-
different matter.
to your point, ma'am, the strategic goals for this next year, we're still assessing the unintended consequences of the budget reductions we've had, like many offices are. Okay, we're not alone, but ours is a large one. And I just realized today that due to this, we've lost DOC support. We had 2 liaison officers from the Department of Corrections that were assigned to our narcotics team and our PROACT team, which deals with property crimes. And as a result of these cuts, we've lost both those liaisons to Kitsap County WestNet. So we lost a huge asset. And then that just came in because the way we had to reline that whole trickle-down effect in our office, our PROACT team, narcotics team is essentially gone. We've had to take animal control, place it into evidence, take the detective out of evidence, place it back into detectives, take one of our detectives, move it back into patrol. All with the idea we have to keep this patrol shift in place. This patrol shift gives us nearly 80 hours of on-duty training time, which meets or exceeds the state requirements by law, but also goes into the proactive, progressive types of training. So there's a huge trickle down, but to the long-term strategies, Travis Adams will be the future undersheriff. That'll take place. And we've got to sit down, we've got to do our projections and analysis. And we've got to lay down what the alignment's going to look like and what the staffing models. And this is best case scenario. I think we've said 10% of your workforce is always gone all the time. It's just a function of any corporation. You have a 10% vacancy in almost every corporation. The concerns we have, if the instability continues, those that have put their applications out accelerates that uncertainty, because not only do we have the 10% vacancies, we may have a whole bunch more. So this thing compounds itself and builds upon itself, and the trick is how do you stop it?
Could I just say something here? You know, this is not the first time that we've watched the budget process here in the county. And it has been Lord of the Flies. And a lot of games being played. And maybe it's on both sides. But could I just suggest, and you've worked at the Pentagon, you know, many of you people here have worked within the military. When you get your budget guidance, this is the amount that you're supposed to be hitting. You bring in a budget that meets that amount. Then you have an explanation. This is what the impact is going to be if you make me meet that amount. And then you also say, in addition, this is what I really need. But you meet the guidance to begin with. And then the commissioners and all of you could sit around and work this through. It does not have to be like this year after year. And this is what we've seen year after year after year.
We absolutely agree with you.
Yeah, but it starts with you and the commissioners and all the elected officials and department heads agreeing that when you come in with that preliminary budget, you meet the budget guidance that the commissioners give you.
30-second warning.
Yeah.
I'm going to just differ with you a little bit because I think Jim mentioned this earlier. And I know that I was sitting next to the judge when the same thing came up, so I would be pretty well in saying I'm probably okay if the judge agrees with me on it. If you look at the law of the state of Washington, it is in the preliminary budget for every elected official to present a budget of what they believe they need, not what somebody else believes, but what they believe they need. Part of the reason for doing that, and this is very, very important, and I can't discuss the outward litigation with you here, but part of this is very important because if I go in and I ask for certain things, and I don't get them and I'm not able to do these things, I'm held liable for it legally. And if those parts of the budget aren't met, and I can at least go back and say when the litigation comes in, Sheriff, why did you not? I asked for the following things and I was denied these things. That for me, is a little bit of self-protection for all the sheriffs in the state of Washington. When we go in and ask for specific things that we have to have, the judge agreed with me. He did not, by coming out and saying, you're going to submit the budget the way we want to submit it the first time, the judge said no. Read the RCW. The RCW states, you will submit a preliminary budget of what the elected official believes they need. And like he said, that doesn't mean you're going to get everything, but you need to submit it by law. And that's why there was so much pushback this year when people said, no, we want to submit a certain way. That's not what the RCW says. And I would agree with the judge and the judges that said we will submit, and the prosecutor, we will submit for what we need, and then those cuts can be made afterwards. And it's not a pre-cut to the budget. We are following exactly what the state law tells us to do. After that, there can have those arguments, but I totally agree with you. And the other thing that I would tell you is that, yes, when you're given something and they say, meet this mark, and we meet the mark, and we're there, and the next day after it changes, and they change the target and put it over here, and then we go over here and meet it, and then it gets changed over here. It makes it very, very difficult when the mark keeps changing, when the target keeps changing. On the last days of our budget, there were issues with ER&R costs that we were given. And then after we do a whole bunch of them, it takes hours to go through these things. We get it all met and we're there, and then, oh, by the way, we're going to change it again. That is what's frustrating for us. We're not a little tiny agency that has 6 or 7 people in the office that can make that adjustment just like this overnight. We've got hundreds of lines that we have to go to, and every time an adjustment is made, there's adjustments all the way through, and it takes a lot of time to do that. And so doing it on the last day, on the 12th hour, or after the 12th hour.
So Brendan, to your point, I would say this, for the department heads that report to the board, which is an independently elected official, exactly what you said is right. Department heads, you will meet these budget instructions or guidelines. Elected officials, which are independently elected and answerable to the electorate, they get to do what they need to do, but to the process then, what you're talking about is, okay, now, electeds are here, boards are here, start working to that happy medium or where you need to get to.
See, we're saying the same thing. It doesn't have to be an either or.
Right.
This can be that you do both. You meet the guidance and you put in, Sheriff,
Right.
that you have to have this and this is why. So you've got the CYA there. You can have both, but you've met the guidance. Now, I want to just go back to those questions that you got. There are a lot of questions that we've given you that we're asking for a lot of detail on. And what we did, we went in and we took your narrative and we drew those questions out. And as we sat in the workshops and sat in the meetings and all of these, that's just gone on and on and on, as you all have recognized. What we're attempting to do is get to what is the real answer. So, for example, is it true that your overtime has increased? And if you give us the detail of for all those years, from 14 to 2018, we want to see that. What is the trend line?
Brendan, can you speak about this later? They're actually 5 minutes out.
Absolutely, but I'm just explaining, Cheryl, why we have to have this in order to finish our study.
Well, and I agree, but we already have that information, but here it is with making comparisons. And also, I think it's very fair to say, if the county decides to put, we have a 10 million instead of 5 million like the roads. But the road went from $2 to $10 million in 9 years, the general fund did not. And so if they're going to go ahead and get those contracts at a 4% increase or 3.2, then they need to make sure they forecast to make sure they got the revenues to support that.
To answer your question,
And we had to
yes.
lay people off to support those contracts.
We had to get through this last minute budget stuff. We had to make all our adjustments. We knew that many of your questions were going to require a bit more processing and detailing, and staff will continue to work and get those to you.
We appreciate it.
Yeah, it's just, we had to make choices about
Yeah.
time allocation
We
for
didn't
staff.
expect it today.
Okay.
We didn't expect it today.
Yeah, we're going to get it to you.
Okay.
We're going to work on it.
Thank you.
Thank you. So on that note, we will adjourn this meeting. I have one quick announcement. The state legislative lobby day is